At Ecosystems, we recently introduced a document called the Blueprint of a World-Class Value-Based Commercial Operating System. For short, we simply call it the Value Blueprint. It is arguably the single longest, most complex name I have ever given any piece of research or IP that I've ever been involved in producing. Nonetheless, the name comes with a purpose because the whole idea of the Value Blueprint is an attempt to capture across 5 levels of, let's say, maturity, the journey that a typical company goes on, or more correctly, could go on, in order to build out its capability over time to engage its B2B customers in a deep value-based relationship and conversation. So it starts with level one, which is essentially an emerging capability around value. And this is kind of where the whole value profession got its start, was with frontline sellers, usually, or maybe success executives, who are engaging as an individual quota carrier, their individual customers in really a value-based conversation. That is to say, they became quite good at helping customers understand the value, not just of the solution and the services that they were receiving from that particular supplier, but also helping them understand the value of taking or pursuing a particular course of action, to say, look, because you went in this direction, here's all the different dimensions along which you can measure value. Here's the math you can use to measure the actual output of those actions. And here's the total money earned or money saved or value created as a result of going down that particular road. And these particular, let's say, frontline sellers have become, and still do to this day, become really, really good at building just an incredible trust-based relationship with their customers, all based on this kind of deep level math, if you will, or articulation of value. And many of those calculations, they live on in a spreadsheet, maybe on a cell drive, on a laptop, maybe they're in some sort of shared drive, but usually they are the domain of that particular individual. Now, over time, what happens is people, of course, kind of catch hold of this. They realize, wow, this seems to be really working for this individual. We should maybe leverage that a little bit. Let's see if we can get some scale. So interstage left the value management profession. So a number of companies, particularly in the SaaS world, have built teams around replicating this particular capability and trying to do it at scale, at least for a company's largest, most important customers. So this is the world of, rather value being atomized at the individual seller level, value becomes centralized in a center of excellence or a centralized value team that sometimes sits in sales or maybe revenue or maybe operations or even finance. And that team is responsible for taking the goodness of that capability that one individual seller has developed and either taking that or starting from scratch and then building out a similar capability that can be scaled across the company's largest or most important accounts. And this is kind of where companies really become especially interested in a platform like Ecosystems, because it provides the technology to really continue that journey across the balance of this maturity model. But eventually what happens is companies realize, well, all this goodness is great, but I've got this centralized team of who has limited capacity. At some point, there's diminishing returns. I can't hire as many people in the centralized team as I have frontline sellers, but I wish all of my frontline sellers and success representatives were engaged in this kind of conversation. So at some point or another, the conversation begins to turn, of course, to scale. And at that point, companies really move, or at least seek to move, from sort of value being centralized to value being what I might call democratized, putting that value discipline back in the hands of frontline sellers, but here not in sort of atomized pockets, but democratically across the entire sales or success organization, so that each and every individual can engage in this kind of conversation, not just with the help of a centralized specialist, but on their own, maybe through the support of technology and capturing all of that information in a centralized CRM or platform system such that it can be replicated, it can be learned from, it can be benchmarked, and it more importantly can be used to create and deepen customer relationships over time that can then be passed on to account success teams or renewal teams or account management teams. Then all of a sudden, what gets really interesting is the rest of the commercial organization kind of gets wind of this. And so marketing might look at this and say, you know what, we can kind of do the same thing through digital channels or in self-service. Or success looks at what sales is doing and says, we can do that post-sale. So in value realizations, we got the sales doing the value promise. In success, we can do the value realization. Or contrarily, it might be the sales team looks at success, who's already having success with this, says we can actually set them up for even greater success by having these conversations pre-sale, not just post-sale. So at that point, then you start getting into some really interesting area where value this value-based conversation starts to look a little bit more almost like an operating system. It becomes the lingua franca, the common language of the entire company, and we begin to really see technology being used as a platform to maintain, not just create that conversation within each functional silo, but to maintain that conversation across those functional silos. So rather than value just being democratized, this is where value really truly becomes systematized. It's stage 4 of the maturity model of a world-class value-based commercial operating system. And I think we really can begin to talk about a commercial operating system. Now, at some point, I think, and for most of us, I think this is still kind of speculative, but nonetheless, one can imagine through the use of algorithms of technology, value doesn't just become systematized, so sort of consistent across functional silos and into the customer boundary, across that customer boundary, but it becomes routinized. It becomes almost automatic. And also at the same time, it becomes almost the ecosystem within which the entire commercial organization, in fact, the entire commercial ecosystem operates. So not just the customer, the seller, the success rep, the marketing team on the supplier side, but on the customer side, all of those customer stakeholders across time as those stakeholders change across an ongoing relationship, and then all of the channel partners who have to get involved as well. So this becomes not just almost like a sales room or a virtual deal room. It actually becomes the environment, almost like a Star Trek holodeck within which the entire commercial relationship or operation unfolds over time across supplier and customer and channel partners, and that's where value becomes almost routinized. It becomes just the way that the business happens, and I think that's where we all would aspire to go. Now, if you ask me where are most companies today, they're in level 2. So they're way back over here on the left with a lot of room to run, moving from atomized to centralized, but then to move from centralized to democratized, to systematized, to routinized. And the whole idea of the blueprint document is to lay out all of the many dimensions along which a company can make advances across that 5-stage process. So if you're interested in seeing the blueprint, it does exist. It's on the Ecosystems website. You can download it there. I'll put a link to it in the notes here for this particular video. And we'd love to walk you through it and give you a sense for how you can think about building in an operating system for your commercial organization, your entire commercial organization, based on world-class value that you co-create with your customer.